Hi, everybody, and welcome to Electric Vehicles 101. We're so glad you could make it here today. Just giving some housekeeping up front. We want to let you know that this webinar will be recorded. So we will send out the recording at the end of this, probably tomorrow, along with the slides and any relevant links that we think that you all could benefit from. So you'll notice that there are two people on the call today. So it's myself. Ezra, if you could hit the next slide. Um, my name is Devin DeLibero. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator on the Drive Green team here at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And I will be doing the latter half of the presentation today. And then my colleague is going to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ezra Messenger. I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Associate, and I will be doing the first half of the presentation today.
So you will be hearing from both of us. You might be hearing from me in the chat when you have questions at the beginning, and then we will definitely stop and answer questions aloud too at different times during the presentation. But just to introduce the organization that we work for Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and we work on the Drive Green team. The mission of Green Energy Consumers Alliance is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a zero carbon future. So we do that through policy and advocacy work at both Rhode Island and Massachusetts state houses. And we also do that through programmatic work like the Drive Green program, where we aim to educate people about all the benefits of electric vehicles and then help facilitate them in their purchasing of an electric vehicle once they're ready through our EV shopping tool. So we're here to talk to you about more of the education part today. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ezra.
All right, so we are going to talk about why electric vehicles, and there are several benefits of an EV. We're going to start with the one I find most important, the environmental benefits. So on this slide, we discuss the grams of CO2 emissions per mile in New England. On the left, we have the tallest bar, and that is a gasoline car with an internal combustion engine, and it will produce about 381 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. In the middle, we have a plug-in hybrid. And for those of you who don't know, a plug-in hybrid is a car that has both a gas engine and a battery engine that can be charged. And that will produce about 176 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. That is definitely better. It's less than half, but it's still not the best. On the right, we have a pure battery electric vehicle, an EV, and this will produce about 96 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. And those emissions actually come from the electric generation source. So this is just the average for New England. But if you have solar panels on your house or you source all of your electricity from renewables like solar or wind or hydro, that number could actually be zero, and the car would emit zero CO2 emissions per mile and be the best option for the environment. So let's look at a macro. We're going to take a macro look at those greenhouse gas emissions. On the left, we have Massachusetts, and this pie chart is from 2023, and it looks at the different sources and the different sectors for the greenhouse gas emissions. And the green, the largest, is from transportation, and it's at 36%. Now, that can be from private car ownership, from public transportation, or from commercial vehicles, but still the transportation sector is the largest. That number used to be 40%, so we can see just from the last few years, the adoption of EVs in the region has lowered the total greenhouse gas emission percentage from compared to all sectors. And then on the right, we have Rhode Island. This pie chart is a little older. It's 4 years old from 2019. And that transportation sector is the blue section, and it's at 39.7%. But that number has also gone down in recent years. But ultimately, we really need to lower the amount of greenhouse gas emissions because the transportation sector is the largest emitter, and EVs, we feel here at Green Energy Consumers, is one of the best ways to do that. Now, Let's talk about life cycle emissions. This encompasses the entire life cycle of the vehicle from production and manufacturing to driving and owning the car. And I hear it a lot. I know a lot of people say that EVs aren't better for the environment because of the battery mining and manufacturing. And that's simply not true. Here we have 4 bars on this graph that represent the life cycle global warming emissions for both EVs, cars and trucks, and gasoline cars and trucks. And the bar on the left represents a typical gasoline car with 32 miles per gallon. The orange on the bottom is the amount of emissions that comes from the vehicle manufacturing, excluding the battery. And then the gray on the top is the vehicle operation. Next to that, we have an electric car, which has that added blue for battery manufacturing. So we do take into account the amount of emissions that come from mining and manufacturing that battery. And still, there's far less, a 52% reduction over the entire life cycle of both vehicles. And electric cars are far, far less emission intensive. Actually, after roughly a year of driving a gas car, it will meet parity with that EV, even when you take the battery manufacturing into account. This is even larger, the differences between a gasoline truck and an electric truck. And we can see a 57% reduction over the life cycle from these emissions. So still, even with the amount of manufacturing, electric cars and electric trucks are far better for the environment and produce far fewer global warming emissions. Now, an additional benefit is public health, and it's very connected to the emissions of these cars. So, because EVs have no tailpipe, they have zero emissions, and they don't add any particulate matter or pollution to the air. Now, if the electricity generation is from a clean and renewable source, then the total emissions are even lower, and they're far, far better for air quality. And as we talked about earlier, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and that's driving climate change, which worsens air quality and amplifies and accelerates a wide range of health risks and disparities. Now, those burdens of unhealthy air include increased asthma attacks, heart attacks, and strokes, lung cancer, and premature death. The ALA is the American Lung Association, and every year they compile a report called Driving to Clean Air. And at the end of this, as Devin said, we'll send you the slides so you can click. We've hyperlinked that report right there if you want to read more about it. But they state the health benefits of zero emission cars and electricity's quote finds that a transition to 100% zero emission new passenger vehicle sales by 2035 coupled with non-combustion electricity generation, would yield tremendous public health benefits across the United States. So there really is a huge benefit to people switching over to EVs to create a cleaner future and to create cleaner air. Now, the ALA supports the Advanced Clean Cars 2 Act. Now, the ACC2 recommends strong emission standards for combustion vehicles from now, it started a few years ago, until 2035. And then starting that year, 100% of new passenger vehicle sales must be zero emission vehicles. And several states have already adopted this, including Massachusetts. And Rhode Island has agreed to adopt the ACC2, and it will take effect next month in January 2024. Now, on top of that, as a part of the report, the ALA supports further recommendations of these goals, combined with non-combustion electricity generation to significantly reduce harmful pollution. So another benefit that we can talk about with electric vehicles, they're far more efficient than traditional gas cars. So only about 12 to 30% of the energy, the gas, or the fuel that you put into a conventional vehicle is actually used to move the car down the road, depending on the drive cycle. The rest of that energy is lost to both engine and driveline inefficiencies or it's used to power different accessories within the car. So this shows that there's a huge potential to improve the fuel efficiency of gas cars, and that improved technology, and the answer is electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are far, far more efficient than their gasoline-powered counterparts. An EV electric drive system is only responsible for a 15 to 20% energy loss compared to that 64 to 75% energy loss from a gasoline engine. EVs also use regenerative braking to recapture and reuse energy that would normally be lost in braking. And for those who don't know, regenerative braking is a system of magnets that are in the wheel well of an electric car. And they're able to use the momentum of the car to then slow down and capture through those magnets the energy that would be lost and transfer it back to the battery. Because of regenerative braking, you don't actually have to use the brake system in the car at all. And if you do have your regenerative braking on its highest setting, you can actually achieve 77 to 100% efficiency. So no power, no electricity that's put into that vehicle would be wasted. So let's now talk and compare the different efficiencies of gas cars and electric cars. So this chart here talks about the MPG of popular vehicles. And for those who don't know, MPG stands for miles per gallon, and it's a way to measure the efficiency of a vehicle. The higher the efficiency, the less waste it produces and the more energy you get out of it. Now, MPGE might be new to some of you, and that stands for miles per gallon electric, and that's how we measure the efficiency of an electric car. Starting on the right, we pick some popular different gas combustion, like a combustion engine cars, and we have the Subaru Outback that gets about 26 miles per gallon. We have the Mazda 6 that gets 31. We have the Ford F-150, which is a truck that gets pretty low, 23 miles per gallon. So these cars really aren't that efficient. In the middle, we have plug-in hybrids. For those of you who might not be ready to switch to a pure electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid could be the answer because they're very efficient and they also are far better for the environment because they have that battery component. So if you look at the Toyota Prius Prime, which is the tallest bar on this chart, it gets 127 mpge and 52 mpg. So this car is very, very efficient. If we look all the way to the left, those 5 blue bars represent EVs that are just pure electric vehicles. So we have the Tesla Model 3 with 132 mpge, and we have the Hyundai Ioniq 6 with 140 mpge. So these electric vehicles are far, far more efficient, as you can see, than the gas counterparts. Further savings beyond just the efficiency come from fuel costs. So this graph here covers the different utility companies here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, where the majority of people are getting their electricity from. And the average price per kilowatt hour is between 30 and 34 cents. This is from National Grid, Eversource, and Rhode Island Energy. We then did some math here, and if you're interested, you can go to our website. We have a PDF that explains all of the math, but we were able to calculate how much money it costs per mile based on these electricity rates. And for National Grid, it's 10 cents per mile for an electric car. And for Eversource and Rhode Island, it is about 9 cents per mile. Then we took the average price for a gallon of gas in Massachusetts, and we divided that by the average MPG of a typical gas car, and it cost about 15 cents per mile to drive a gas car. So there's actually substantial savings. You'd save about 33% by switching to a gas car, saving about 5 to 6 cents per mile to fuel the car and drive it down the road. As you can see here, the math is available on our fuel cost page. Further savings come from the maintenance and repair costs, which are actually cut in half. There are far fewer moving parts in an EV engine compared to a combustion engine, so there's a lot less that can go wrong, and there's a lot less that needs to be maintained, fixed, repaired, or replaced. The battery, motor, and electronics require little maintenance, and it's unlikely that you'll ever have to replace the battery during your entire ownership of the EV. And as I spoke about a few slides ago, if you use regenerative braking, it will protect the brakes and you actually will ever need to use them, saving you the cost of having to replace brake pads and have your brakes checked. And if you don't believe us, we have linked here a consumer report that shows EVs save big on total cost of ownership, including the depreciation, financing, and resale value. And if you're interested, you can click here and you can read more about that report and the total savings. This graph here, I think, is really interesting, and it's a really easy and visual way to see how those savings come about. So on the left, the tallest bar is ICEV, that is internal combustion engine vehicle, and it costs about 10 cents in maintenance costs per mile. Next, we have the hybrid electric vehicle, which costs about 9 cents. Then we have the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that costs about 9 cents as well. And then all the way to the right, we have the BEV, the battery electric vehicle, and that only costs about 6 cents in maintenance costs per mile. So that's a savings of about 40% if you switch to an EV. And the reason why is there are no pink or purple sections on the BEV bar, and those represent transmission service, spark plugs, oxygen sensor, timing belts, fuel filter, engine air filter, because the car does not have those parts, so they don't need to be fixed or maintained. And lastly, the biggest reason to switch to an EV for a lot of people is because they are very fun to drive. So here we have different pictures from our community members standing very happily next to their EVs. And for those who have never driven one, EVs are very, very fast. And that's because they have a lot of torque and they have a lot of instant power. And a lot of EVs are actually faster than a typical Ferrari. So those 0 to 60s are pretty impressive. So now we're going to talk about ownership. The first section will cover range and charging. And this is a really big hurdle for a lot of
Ezra,
people.
let's just pause 1 second. I want to take a just check to see if there's any questions from anybody.
Okay.
Okay. So, this is just a natural breaking point in the presentation. So if anybody has a question, please put it in the chat about what Ezra just talked about. I'm sorry, put it in the Q&A. The first question is, does the stated efficiency of electric cars and energy conversion include the loss of energy in converting fuel to electricity at a typical power station as powered today? Um, so I don't believe that it figures out what the efficiency is, and what the conversions are according to different power plants, because there's just so many, and some utilities use much greener mixes than others. So, like in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, for example, we have something called renewable energy standards, which require the utilities to include more renewable green components into their energy mix every year. Whereas there's other utilities that don't do anything like that, don't have regulations on themselves like that. So that it's not something that could be easily like figured out. And then also in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we have different programs called that fall under the Green Municipal Aggregation um, headline, I guess, category. Basically, that means towns and cities take all of their electricity consumption and put it out to bid to get a reduced rate and to get even more of a green component into their mix than is required by law. Um, so if you live in one of those communities, you're doing even better than those who are not in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. It's probably not the answer you were looking for, but it is just something that we don't have a strict answer for.
Yeah. And if you are concerned about the loss of energy, It does not take into account the thermodynamics and system losses from electricity generation, but neither did the efficiency that we measured for gasoline cars take into effect the amount of the entire life cycle of that gasoline transportation from wherever it sourced from to the United States and into the car. It only focused on the actual efficiency of the vehicle.
Perfect. Okay, it looks like we're pretty quiet. Other than that, thank you for taking the break. Um, and please continue on.
Okay. So, as I said, now we're going to talk about some range and charging information. And I know for a lot of people, the biggest hurdle before getting the EV is their fear of range anxiety. And range anxiety really is a thing of the past. So we have different electric car ranges for both plug-in hybrids and for pure electric cars on this chart here. And I will start on the right with the tallest bar, which is the Toyota Prius Prime. And with their gas engine, they'll get about 644 miles of range. And with the electric engine, they'll get an additional 44. So that is almost 700 miles of range from one tank of gas and one full battery. And for those who aren't ready to take the full jump into a pure EV, a PHEV like the Toyota Prius Prime could be a great starting point. Next, on the left, all those blue bars are the electric range of just battery electric vehicles. And I'll just point out a few, like the Hyundai Ioniq 6, that gets 361 miles of range. The Rivian R1S, which is a large SUV, gets roughly 340 miles of range. And all the way to the left, we have the very popular Tesla Model 3, which gets 330 miles of range depending on the trim. But this will definitely cover the majority of most people's commutes. And if you're driving further than that, you have quite a bit of range to get where you need to go. On top of that, and we'll talk about this later, but infrastructure is really, really changing rapidly for the better and is greatly improving. There's a lot of money, especially in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, including from the utility programs, the states, and the federal government for different infrastructure projects, including at-home charging. The federal government has also earmarked billions of dollars to improve and build new charging infrastructure across the country, especially along major highway and interstate routes. And we'll also talk about this later, but many different car brands are partnering with Tesla and will soon have access to the Tesla supercharging network. So again, range anxiety really is a thing of the past. For this slide, we're going to talk about why charging is not hard. It's not hard to understand and it's not hard to do. So there are three basic levels of charging. The first is level 1, which runs on just a 110-volt regular house outlet, and you'll get roughly 2 to 6 miles of range per hour. Level 2 charging runs on a 220-volt. Those can be installed in the house. You usually need to hire an electrician, but it will greatly increase the amount of range per hour with roughly 11 to 54 miles, depending on the vehicle. And lastly, we have DC fast charging. This can't be installed in the house. These are the charging stations you often see out in public, and you can get 90 miles, some cars up to 200 miles in only 30 minutes of charging. There are also there are several plug types. We have a few pictured here. For level 1 and level 2 charging, you would utilize a J1772 port on the car. And for DC fast charging, you would use the J1772 combo, which is in the bottom right, or the CHAdeMO, which is in the middle, or the North American Charging Standard, which I'll talk about on the next page. So this is the Tesla or North American Charging Standard. You can see in the top right what it looks like. And this port can be used for all three levels of charging. Recently, like I mentioned before, several OEMs have partnered with Tesla to allow their cars access to the Tesla supercharger network. This includes Ford, Rivian, GM, BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, Jaguar, and many more. And these partnerships, while they've entered them now, will take effect in spring of 2024 when adapters for these different partnered manufacturers will be provided to the owners of these EVs. And starting in 2025, all new partner vehicles will come equipped with the NACS port standard. This is great news because currently there are over 12,000 Tesla superchargers across the United States and Canada. So this is a really extensive network of charging. And you can also charge on the go. We have different maps here. They come from PlugShare, which has no affiliation with any particular charging station. The green little dots are level 2 charging, and the orange is DC fast charging. There are other apps as well, like ChargePoint or a better route planner that can help you plan a route, especially if you're traveling long distances and takes into account the car's range and charging stations along the way. Western Massachusetts, we can see, especially along major highway corridors, there are several public charging stations, and in Eastern Massachusetts, especially around Boston, there are plenty of public chargers, and every day this number is increasing. And here we have Southeast Mass and the Cape, and we also have Rhode Island, which is mostly most are centered around Providence, but new stations are being built further out, especially in the western areas. So we've created a guide to help you walk through the process of installing an electric vehicle charging station at home. The majority of EV drivers charge at home, either with a household outlet or a level 2 charging station. It's really easy and simple. It takes about 10 seconds to plug in, and you can completely eliminate the time you spend at a gas station. And for most people, the car just charges overnight, and you don't even have to worry about it. Now, if you have an EV and you need some guidance about what kind of charger to buy and how to navigate the process of installing an EVSE, then you should check out our guide. It's really easy to install a level 2 charging station at home, especially if you already have a 240-volt outlet, which are typical for dryers. All you have to do then is buy the charging station and hire an electrician to plug it in and make sure your house can handle the load. Otherwise, the electrician can just install that 240-volt outlet wherever you're going to charge, which is pretty easy and it's a standard job for them, including labor and parts. It usually only costs about 1,000, maybe 1,200 for this work. Our installing electric vehicle charging at home guide can help you also think about whether you should rely mostly on a level 1 or a level 2 charging, how to pick a charging station. There are many available, things that will affect the cost of your EVSE installation and more. So once we share these slides, you can check that out if you are interested. And don't worry, if you live in an apartment or a condo, we have resources for you as well. Our Empower Your Tenants with EV Charging Frequently Asked Question Guide has a bunch of information to help you work with your condo board or your landlord to figure out ways to install charging, especially if there's like a public lot on the property. So we've got you covered there. And now I'm going to pass this over to Devin, who is going to talk about federal and state incentives.
Here we go. I'm back. Thank you, Ezra. Just want to give a second to see if anyone has any questions. This is again just a little breaking point for us, so we'll give you like a couple seconds and see if anyone's typing. One question is, are there best practices for charging in terms of maintaining long-term battery life? So yes, there are. So when you charge, you generally want to keep your car between 20 and 80% because that's where the battery is kind of the happiest to be. Kind of think of it like your cell phone battery. You don't want to completely deplete the battery because eventually gives you some wear and tear on your battery. Um, and then you don't want to charge to 100% either because that also leads to wear and tear on your battery, which will in turn lead to a decrease in range over time. So if you need to charge to 100%, say you're going a long distance, feel free to do so. It's not that big of a deal. You just don't want to do it all the time. Another thing you don't want to do all the time is DC fast charge because that quick charge can really hurt your battery if you use it a lot, and also can lead it to a decrease in range over time. But if you like the same thing, use it in moderation. If you need it, definitely use it, and it's not a problem. But if you're using it as your main source of charging, then it becomes a little problematic. Okay. Someone has a question about how many fast chargers are there right now in Massachusetts? Well, I do not have a magical number for you off the top of my head, but what I can tell you to do is to go to a website called PlugShare and look at a map of Massachusetts, and then you can filter by plug type. So you can filter by like CCS combo, which is a J1772 combo, and just see what's in there. You can also look to see how many Tesla fast charging stations there are. And that might be another filter that you have to use to check that out. But play around with that website and see what happens.
While you were answering, I decided to look it up, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, there are 371 DC fast chargers in Massachusetts, and a total of 4,110 EV charging ports in the state. So pretty good number.
See, Ezra has the magical answer. Thank you, Ezra. But still, if you want to check out charging stations in your area, definitely look at PlugShare. It'll help a lot. Then one question is, how big of a difference does it make in terms of environmental impact to charge at night versus the day? So, um, I'm going to do my best to answer this, but I'm not an expert in like load management. But basically, you want to charge at night because that's when energy consumption is lower when you charge overnight because people are sleeping. So there's not as much of a demand for electricity on the grid, which means they don't have to power up those generators and those like bigger pollutants that can give us electricity really easily, but really in a harmful way to the environment. So that's part of the reason why you want to charge during the day because the load is down, which means they don't have to power up all those other electricity generators that aren't as great. And if you live in Massachusetts and under National Grid Service territory, they also do some time of use rate programs that you could look into, which would potentially give you money back. I think they give you a rebate or they charge you less um, per kilowatt hour when you're charging your car. Okay, those are some really excellent questions. So I'm going to move on to the federal and state incentives. They are complicated. I will warn you now. So when you have questions, please feel free to put them in the question box. I will wait until we're done with the section, but I will get to them. Next slide, please, Ezra. Okay, so we're first going to start talking about the clean vehicle credit, which is the federal tax credit. So we're going to do federal first, and we're going to do state. So the clean vehicle credit is a tax credit that's up to $7,500. Then it's based on your personal tax liability. So if you go to a dealership and you're thinking, oh, great, this car qualifies for the $7,500, make sure you do too. And you have to figure that out with, whoever your tax expert is. This tax credit is valid through 2032, which means this program is going until 2032. There is a list that we've provided a link to here of the manufacturers and models that are eligible for this for the new cars, and that is on one of the federal government's website. So it is the actual cars that qualify. There are qualifiers for you, the consumer, if you're looking to buy a new electric vehicle. So you have to, if you're a joint filer, make $300,000 or less. For a head of household, it's $225,000, and for individual filers, it's $150,000. This federal tax credit is available for battery electric vehicles, which is just a way of saying all electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and fuel cell vehicles. It is not eligible for the hybrids without a plug. Now I'm going to move on to talk about the vehicle requirements. Next slide. Thank you. So here's where it kind of gets a little tricky. So once you know that you hit all the requirements personally, you now have to think about the vehicles that you want and if those vehicles hit those requirements that are put forth by the federal government. So the first requirement is the assembly location. The assembly location of the vehicle has to be in North America, so the US, Canada, or Mexico. That's the first step to qualify. The next step is that it has to hit the MSRP price cap. And for SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, that's $80,000. For sedans and hatchbacks, that's $55,000. Know that it is dependent on MSRP, not the actual purchase price that you end up paying. I like to really like highlight that. So if you potentially are interested in a car, an electric sedan that goes for an MSRP of 50,000, but the dealer and at the end of the day charges you $57,000. You are still eligible for the federal tax credit if you hit all those aforementioned requirements, plus what I'm about to tell you, as long as the MSRP is under $55,000. Um, so now you personally meet the requirements. The final assembly location is great. The MSRP price cap is also fits the qualifications. Then the final piece is the battery piece. So the battery piece divides the $7,500 into two buckets, the $3,750 each. One bucket is for the minerals, and then one bucket is for the battery components themselves. So that is where things get tricky, and you really want to make sure that you are up to date on your information and know which car definitely qualifies for this federal tax credit. And I'm going to show you how they're structuring this in the coming years. Next slide, please. So, like I said before, they're split into two different buckets, the critical minerals and the battery components. As of 2023, which we're almost done with, 40% of the batteries and minerals by value must be mined or processed in North America or a country with a free trade agreement with the US or recycled in the US. This is going to go up to 50% next year. And what is problematic about that is that not all the manufacturers are going to be able to satisfy this requirement, or the battery components requirement. So you're going to see some shifting of cars that are actually eligible for this. So definitely stay tuned and keep your finger on the pulse of the market and all the different changes with the federal government, which we will update on our blogs and marketing emails. It might not be the best time to buy an EV at the beginning of the year because we're not really sure where all of this is going to settle. That being said, we still have to talk about the battery components, which in 2023 is 50% of the value of battery components must be manufactured or assembled in North America. And next month, in 2024, that's going to go up to 60%. Again, we don't know if the manufacturers are going to be able to meet all of that. We're waiting to see what the official list is of cars that will qualify for these newly upped requirements. And I don't expect to see that until maybe just before the new year or into the new year. Next slide, please. And now this is the fueleconomy.gov's website, and this shows you right now what cars qualify. So it's a whole list, and it is not a static list. It's ever evolving as different cars start to meet these requirements that we just talked about. So definitely check this out. Again, you will have this link when we send around the slides. And yeah, it'll just show you all the options you have right now. Next slide, please. Now, that is all very, it might be confusing. There's just a lot of things to know and to make sure that the car qualifies for and that you qualify for. If you are just thinking this is a headache that I don't want to deal with, you can decide to lease because there is a leasing loophole with the commercial vehicle tax credit. So what that means is that there are two different programs, one for a personal consumer, which we just talked about, and one for a commercial consumer. When you lease a car, You don't actually own the car, the leasing agency owns the car, which means they can get the commercial vehicle credit, which doesn't have anything to do with the battery requirements I just talked about. So you don't have as many requirements limiting you. You can pretty much buy any EV with the commercial vehicle tax credit, or sorry, lease any EV. But it does depend on the manufacturer and the dealer rolling the commercial vehicle credit into the price of the lease, whether or not you get it. So it's up to them if they decide to do that, but most will. But in this case, leasing might be a really good option. So you could still get a lower monthly payment. And then if you really like the car after your lease is up, you could potentially get the used federal tax credit, which we're going to talk about next. As your next, oh, there we go. We'll talk about that, but I'm just going to sum up what we just spoke about now. So know that things are shifting, especially with the new year coming and new requirements being upped. The manufacturer's list will change over time and hopefully will increase as time goes on because manufacturers know the schedule of the battery requirements and they will have to shift their supply chains. The United States may sign more battery-specific free trade agreements, which again, it might open up more cars to receive the federal tax credit. Like I said, battery requirements ramp up every year, and new vehicle models will come out that we might not even know about now that might satisfy all of these requirements. So just keep checking back. You can always reach out to us or just look at our blogs or our website, and we'll help you along the way. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to talk about the used electric vehicle tax credit. So remember when we talked about the commercial leasing loophole? If you decide to do that and then buy the car after your lease, it's technically a used car and you never owned it. So you could potentially get this too. With that being said, we have the list of all the cars that are used that qualify. For this program, battery requirements do not apply, which is fantastic. However, the tax credit is a little less. It's $4,000 or 30% of the sales price, whichever is lower. You do have to buy this from a dealership, so not just like a random person from Craigslist. That has to be at least 2 years old, the car, and cost $25,000 or less. So that is the tricky part, is that after your car comes off lease, it's $25,000 or less. This will only apply to the first resale because the tax credit follows the car, not the person. So the car can only get the used tax credit once. And this does have a lower income threshold. So for joint filers, it's $150,000. And for individual filers, it's $75,000. Next, please. So now we come to another new development with the federal tax credit. So as of January 1st of next year, so in about a month, the federal tax credit is going to become point of sale. So this means that you, the consumer, can choose to transfer the tax credit to an IRS registered dealership, which you'll check the IRS website at some point and hopefully they'll have that list up. But right now, dealerships are still applying to be part of this program. What's really fantastic about this is that it means that it is no longer relying upon your personal tax liability. It's simply, you can just have the dealer give you the money either towards the down payment or you can just receive cash and it's right off the top of the vehicle. You don't have to wonder if you have enough tax credit to do it because it's not dependent on that if you do it this route. And you don't have to wait for tax time, even if you do qualify, because you can just get it right then and there. You do need to know that the income limits still apply, which we talked about earlier. And yeah, so it is just kind of a great equalizer, I think. And I'm really excited to see this part of the federal tax credit come to fruition. And hopefully there'll be a lot of cars that will later in the year qualify for the federal tax credit. Next slide, please. Um, Now, one question we get a lot is about infrastructure tax credits. Basically, what that means is installing a charging unit at your home. So this is something that had we had already had access to this program, but they made some adjustments to it with the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. What this means is that you can get 30% of the cost of the installation of the charging unit, not to exceed $1,000. This may be able to transfer credit to the installer to receive a point of sale rebate, but the details of that program have not been brought to light just quite yet. Um, if you want to, sorry, there are eligibility requirements that previously were not there. So you have to not be in an urban area, and you have to live in an area that, or you have to live in an area that's poverty rate is at least 20%, or the median family income is less than 80% of state median family income. And if that's confusing to you, don't worry, because you can click this link once we send the slides around that says "See if you qualify" to see if you qualify. Um, so just keep that in mind if you want to install a level 2 charging unit at your home. Now, if you are a Massachusetts resident, you can also look to see what the charging incentives are through your utility companies. You guys in Massachusetts have really good programs. In Rhode Island, we're not so lucky, not just quite yet. I think those are in the works, though. Next slide, please. Okay. So now we're going to move on to talk about all the different state rebates, and I will try to talk fast because I know we only have 14 minutes left. Okay. The Massachusetts program is called More EV, but More EV has since kind of split its rebate up into a few different buckets, or I guess a few different like sub programs is the better word for it. So the first program is More EV Standard. That allows you to get $3,500 for a battery electric vehicle. They no longer do plug-in hybrid rebates. However, the total MSRP has to be $55,000 or under. Excuse me. The purchase, you can either purchase or lease it. If you lease it, the terms have to be 36 months. And it can be purchased in or outside of Massachusetts, but you just have to be a Massachusetts resident. You can receive the rebate two ways. You can receive the rebate by applying for it on the More EV website after you purchase it. Or if there's a dealership that's participating in the point of sale program, you can get the rebate off the car right then and there. But you want to first do your homework. So you want to go on the More EV website, and they'll let you know, they'll show you the list of dealerships that are currently operating within their point of sale rebate program. So that's the first part, More EV Standard, and that's for a new car. Okay, now the second part is More EV Used. So these are for used cars. You can get, again, $3,500 off a battery electric vehicle. The final sales price has to be $40,000 or less. It has to be purchased at a licensed Massachusetts dealership, so that's different than More EV Standard. This is retroactive to November 10th, 2022. So if you or someone you know bought a used car then, this is a good little tidbit of information. Also, you need to know that the vehicle must not have gotten the More EV rebate in the past 3 years. So keep that in mind. However, if you want this rebate, you need to make sure that you hit the income requirements, because they are trying to go for folks who have more low to moderate income. So participation in this is income qualified programs, which you can see the list of them on the More EV website, or modified adjusted gross income under the limit, which is 150K for married people, $112,000 roughly for head of household, and everyone else it's $75,000. You can apply on a more EV website, um, or you can get it at a participating dealership at point of sale. Next, please. Um, Next is more EV Plus, which is which can be added to more EV standard or more EV used. This is an additional rebate for low-income drivers of $1,500. If you are participating in an income qualified program, which you can check out on the More EV website. It's also retroactive to November 10th, 2022. And again, this is point of sale, or you can apply for it online. Next, please. Finally, we're going to talk about more EV trucks. More EV trucks has two kind of like subcategories. So the vehicles must meet the following requirements, which is the new electric or fuel cell pickup trucks with a gross vehicle weight rating between 6,000 and 10,000 pounds, which is like your kind of like a regular pickup truck, kind of, if you want to picture that. Or it can be a new electric or fuel cell vehicle of any body type with a gross vehicle weight rating between 8,500 to 10,000 pounds. So those are the more heavy duty type vehicles. There is a maximum MSRP for the purchase of a more EV truck, which is $80,000. But what's really great is there's a wide variety of entities and people that are eligible. So you can be a Massachusetts resident, a private business in Massachusetts, a nonprofit in Mass, an educational institution, or local municipal and state governments and departments. So many people qualify for this program. Next. So these are pictures of vehicles that qualify for that first sub part of the program, the 8,000 to 10,000. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, the lower weight category. So these are like the Ford E-Transit, which is not pictured here, but the F-150 Lightning is in that second picture, or the Rivian R1T, which is the truck in the top picture, and the Rivian R1S, which is the SUV, also in the top picture. So you can see that those are like more normal vehicles that people buy, so you can get quite a bit of money off a truck, or technically an SUV. If you want to go through this program. Next, please. So just to round this out, for more EV Plus, if you participate in income qualifying programs, you may be eligible for a more EV Plus rebate adder in addition to the more EV standard and more EV used rebates. Just wanted to reiterate that for you all. The rebate provides an additional $1,500 to qualified applicants. So this is what that means. And actually, it does apply for more EV trucks. And I don't know why I didn't say that in the text, but it does. So you can get for more EV standard with more EV plus up to $5,000 off the purchase price of the vehicle. For more EV trucks, $9,000. For more EV used, you can get $5,000 off the purchase price of a electric vehicle. So really, it is a great time to live in Massachusetts if you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle. Next, please. Rhode Island is much quicker to talk about, so I will just whiz on through this. Rhode Island's program is called Drive EV, and there's also an income accommodating program called Drive Plus. So in Rhode Island, we have a price cap of $60,000 for new cars. That's not MSRP, that's just a price cap. And for used cars, it's $40,000. It is not point of sale. You do have to apply on the Drive EV website. But you have 120 days to apply, so it's no big deal. Plenty of time to do that. It is also available for purchase or leased cars. However, you must purchase from an Rhode Island dealership or select Massachusetts dealerships, which is on the Drive EV website. However, I've heard from the Office of Energy Resources, which is the state office that houses this program, that if you contact them and ask them for a specific exemption for a certain Massachusetts dealership, they are most likely going to accept it. So keep that in mind. Now, what do these rebates look like? So for new battery electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles, it's $1,500. If you have the income program, it's an additional $1,500, which is $3,000 total. For a plug-in hybrid, there is still a program in Rhode Island for that. So that's $1,000 for the regular program for a new vehicle, and an additional $1,500 if you qualify for Drive Plus, which is total $2,500. For used vehicles, the incentives decrease a little bit. So for fuel cell and battery electric vehicles, it's $1,000 with the regular Drive EV rebate, and it's $1,500 in addition if you have the Drive Plus rebate program if you're qualified. So it's $2,500 a piece total. In potential. And then for plug-in hybrids, the rebate is $750. And then if you have, of course, the Drive EV Plus program, it's $1,500, so potentially $2,250 in rebate savings. So also a good time to live in Rhode Island if you want an EV. And all of these state programs can be combined with federal incentives, so you can potentially see a lot of savings. Next question. Next slide, please. Finally, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't talk about our website. So this is our electric vehicle shopping tool. So generally speaking, we like to show people this because this is a way for you to compare cars really easily. Each car you'll see has its own individual card where we talk about the fast facts everyone wants to know. So you want to know what the base MSRP is. You want to know what the drivetrain is, the range, how fast it takes to charge at different levels, and then the rebates and things like that. And then you can also then, if this car has a dealership associated with us, go and sign up to test drive through our program. It might not have a dealership associated with it, like Tesla, who has a different model, sales model, but we still have everything listed there just so you can easily compare. So please do check it out. Even if you don't want to buy through the program, that's okay too. Ezra, I think that is it. Okay. So, I'm gonna just pause for questions really quickly. Oof. This question is, any suggestions for the best way to track electricity use if we are sharing a power source with a neighbor? I have not a good idea with that. If you are specifically talking about like charging your car and monitoring that electricity usage, you can install a level 2 charging unit at home. That's a smart unit um, that can tell you potentially how much power it's using. And so you can do those calculations to see how much you owe versus how much they owe, or how much the EV charging is increasing your utility bill. But other than that, that's all I got. This question is, how do Green Energy Consumers Alliance get cars into its program from dealer contact? That is an excellent question. So folks like Ezra and myself go out to different dealerships and ask them if they want to join the program. It's basically free marketing for them. We just really want to connect people with electric vehicles after we provide them all the tools. So we go out and ask them if they want to join. A lot of times they say no, sometimes they say yes, and that is how we have dealerships associated with cars on the EV shopping tool. I will say that we do ask for a $100 referral fee if you actually buy the car. If you don't, we don't ask for any money. So that's how we get them, and that's how that works.
There was another question earlier that I typed a response to, but maybe you want to add. It's from Timothy Groves. After January 1st, 2023, can you get immediate IRS tax credit when you lease?
IRS tax credit when you for the commercial vehicle, or
Just
just
for regular lease.
um technically you should be able to. I don't think it's going to work as smoothly as the government is promising us. Ezra and I have been doing a lot of research on it, and actually, Ezra's writing a blog on it right now. Um, right now, there's no list of dealerships that are going to be participating in this program anywhere, which doesn't mean that there isn't one internally, but there isn't one on their website. And we don't even know which cars are going to qualify now based on the increased battery requirements. And
But
there has been like lists that guess, right? But we're not completely sure.
but for a lease, it would still be the same process of going through like the bank is technically commercial vehicle loophole.
If you're leasing and you want to do the commercial vehicle lease, or you want to know, if you want to do the commercial vehicle lease, I actually I don't think it matters because you're already getting that rolled into the price.
Right, that's what I had answered to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. But for if you personally buy it and you're trying to get that consumer federal tax credit, um, that's how it should work. But I think there are going to be some kinks in that process that will might not be worked out in January. So we're actually over time. Ezra, can you just flip? I think there's like one more slide.
This one is not correct, but this is.
Okay. So just finally, we are a nonprofit that work in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and we do a lot of content like this. If you liked what we did today and the information we gave you, please consider donating. We would really, really appreciate it. We are currently trying to reach, I think, a match of $15,000. So if you have anything you'd like to donate, we would love it if you'd consider. Um, but thank you so much to everybody who has joined today. Thank you, Ezra, for doing a fantastic job in the first half of the presentation. We really appreciate you taking the time and all the excellent questions that you asked. We will be following up with an email in the coming days with all the follow-up information. And if you have a question after that, please feel free to reach out and we will do our best. So thank you, everybody, and have a great night.